Start. Morning. Well, thank you all very much for coming. It's brilliant to see so many of you here today. Just a few bits of housekeeping before we get started. We're not expecting any fire alarms today, so if any do go off, please exit the building. The toilets, if you haven't found them yet, gents is just over there and the ladies is just round there. And we'll be serving coffee and lunch just outside where you've had refreshments earlier. The Wi-Fi password, if any of you need to use that, is here, Wi-Fi 5030. Okay, brilliant. So my name is Charlie Winkworth-Smith. I'm at the KTN. I will just briefly take you through the agenda for the day. We're going to have a talk covering the context, aims and scope of the competition by Joe Hill from Innovate UK. There'll be plenty of time for questions after that, so please wait till the Q&A. We'll then hear about equality, diversity and inclusion from Zoe. Sven's then going to give you top tips for your application, and Ben will also give you an introduction to human-centered design. After the break, we've got a talk on human-centered design in action, and then we'll be doing our pitch presentations. We'll aim to break for lunch around 1 o'clock. Brilliant. So I'll hand over to Joe now, who's going to tell you about the competition. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name's Joe Hill. I'm the GCRF Programme Manager at Innovate UK. Thank you very much for coming. It's great to see such a good turnout under the circumstances. So welcome. So today I'm going to talk about Demonstrate Impact competition. This is the round 2 of the competition. I'm going to talk about the competition structure, the scope, the eligibility criteria and so on. And there's plenty of time to ask questions at the end. So Demonstrate Impact is funded by the Grand Challenges Research Fund, which is an official development assistance funding from the UK government, particularly to support pioneering innovation to tackle challenges in developing countries. Last year, Innovate UK came on board as a delivery partner. We have 6 programmes in our GCRF portfolio, and Demonstrate Impact is one of those. So why did we launch Demonstrate Impact? Well, really, we believe that there are affordable, appropriate, innovative solutions out there to development challenges, but they're not always being applied. And the biggest factor, one of the biggest factors, is risk. So many businesses might feel that it's too risky to launch a new product or service in a developing country market. And many investors might feel it's too risky to back a new innovative product in a developing country market. And customers may think it's too risky to try unproven, untested solutions. So essentially, Demonstrate Impact is a de-risking mechanism. And it's to help innovations get to market more quickly. So we really want to support pioneering, transformative innovation. Innovations that may create new markets, boost infrastructure, improve value chains, create jobs. And this Demonstrate Impact is really to give you a chance to assess the need in that market, assess the viability in that market before you go forward to launch. We're looking for solutions that meet a real gap in the market, actually meet demand, solutions that have commercial potential, solutions that have high potential for impact, social economic impact. And also we're looking for project teams that have a genuine desire to engage with local users, stakeholders and customers. What we're not looking for is a tech push from the UK, sort of parachuting in ideas. So as I said, this is ODA funding, and that means that the primary beneficiaries must be poor and disadvantaged communities in developing countries. That might be a direct benefit through access to the new products and services, or indirect benefit through greater access to jobs, better infrastructure and so on. Obviously, there's also a secondary benefit to UK businesses who get the opportunity to test their product or service in a market, and find the right partners and stakeholders. So I'll talk a bit about competition structure. There are 2 phases to demonstrate impact. Phase 1 we're calling discovery. Phase 2 we're calling prototype. In phase 1, we're offering up to £60,000 grant over a 6-month period to test the market viability, assess the market viability in the developing country. In phase 2, we are offering up to £500,000 in grant over a 1 to 3 year period, and that is really to work towards launching a prototype in that market. I'll just give you a few statistics from our previous round of Demonstrate Impact. We had 155 applications and we funded 31 at phase 1. We have got money to fund up to 30 at the maximum of £60,000 each, but actually in the last round a few people applied for less than 60,000 and it gave us a little leeway so we could fund an extra one. So that was a great benefit, a collective benefit of not necessarily applying for the maximum. Phase 1 is an open competition. Anybody can apply. Phase 2 is a closed competition. So only those, that are successful in phase 1 can apply for phase 2. Now, in phase 1, in this round, it's different from the last round. We're making it mandatory for businesses to use human-centered design methodology as part of their phase 1 activities. Why are we doing that? Well, this competition is based on a competition that Innovate UK ran with the Design Foundation that enabled small businesses to go through a human-centered design process. And we had great feedback from those businesses. They said it really helped them gain insight into how users behave and what they really want. And it helped them not rush into launching something that actually wouldn't work. So it saved them time and it saved them money. And it helped them avoid getting tunnel visioned on the technology, which is very easy to do, obviously. So it really helped them step back and ask, how can we help people? What problems are we actually trying to solve for people? How do people want to solve their own problems? And is our solution the right solution? And I think in developing country context, it's particularly important, and human-centered design helps with this, to distinguish between need and demand. Because it's really easy to identify need. For example, many countries in the developing world need clean water. Many communities need clean water. That's undeniable. There's lots of evidence to back that up. But that doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to want to buy a water filter. People behave in different ways, unexpected ways, and they want particular solutions to solve their problems. We could say many people around the world, most of us in this room, probably need to get more exercise. But it doesn't mean we want to go and buy a gym membership. Again, we want a particular solution to our problem. So human-centered design helps us distinguish that, and the phase 1 of Demonstrate Impact is an amazing opportunity to spend this 6-month period finding out how do people behave, observing how people behave, what do they really want, and gaining those insights. Now, obviously, backing pioneering innovations is quite high risk, and so we accept that. We accept that some of these projects that go through phase 1 might fail. There might not be enough demand, genuinely, or the technology might not be able to be adapted to suit that local market. And so this is, again, a chance in phase 1 to discover that and either iterate or pivot or stop or learn from the experience. We're also relatively comfortable with a degree of ambiguity at phase 1 and uncertainty. So, for example, you don't have to apply with a partner at phase 1, which is different from many other competitions. Lots of people did apply with a partner, actually, in the last round, but some didn't, and that's okay, because part of phase 1 is going out to the country and finding the right partner and finding the right stakeholders. And you may have applied with a partner and then want to change that partner at the end of phase 1, and that's also fine. So we accept that. What we're really looking for in your application forms at phase 1, though, is the quality of the activities that you're planning in phase 1. So what are you actually doing that's going to help you gain those deep insights into your users and customers? how exactly you're going to observe user behaviour. What activities are you going to do those observations? How are you going to engage with stakeholders and potential partners? How are you really going to find out what people want in relation to your innovation? So that's what we're really looking for in your applications at phase 1. Now, early stage design work in itself is a de-risking mechanism, and we really firmly believe that if you do the right activities in phase 1, you're more likely to gain traction, you're more likely to gain economic value, and you may well attract investment if you do those activities well. And that is exactly why we've built it into the competition. We want you to gain confidence in the feasibility of that focus market. So this is this competition structure. We're now at phase 1, application stage. The deadline, as I'm sure you all know, is May the 6th at 12 noon. Each application then gets assessed by 5 assessors, and then you'll get notified by June the 19th about whether you've been successful. There's then a due diligence phase where we have to do project finance checks and so on, and so that will take approximately 3 months, and we expect projects to start in mid-September. Those projects will last 6 months, and at the end of phase 1 we expect an activities report, which really we want you to tell us of what you learned, what you discovered in phase 1. There'll then be an application phase for phase 2, an application form rather for phase 2, and there'll probably be about a 5 to 6 month gap between phase 1 and phase 2, because we have to do the application, we have to do the assessment, and then we have to do the due diligence. And we'll have to do due diligence on your overseas partners as well. So we would expect a 5 to 6 month gap. So that's the timeline. Let's look at scope. So there are 5 factors to consider when you're looking at scope. Is your innovation demonstration ready? And what we mean by that is it's not yet in the market. It might be in other markets, and that's fine, but it's not in the developing country market that you're focused on. But it also doesn't require a huge amount of technical development to get to market. You're essentially ready, but you just need to do this market feasibility study first. It needs to address one of 10 SDGs, which I'll run through in a second, that we've identified. It needs to be ODA eligible, it needs to be working in a DAC-listed country, and it needs to be aware of gender equality and social inclusion. So I'll run through these in a bit more detail. These are the 10 SDGs that we're targeting. You can see health, education, clean water and sanitation, etc., economic growth, decent work, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, and peace, justice and strong institutions. You'll notice that we haven't explicitly got an energy or agriculture SDGs, because we do have other funds that support those. We've got the Energy Catalyst and the Agri-Tech Catalyst that are partly funded by GCRF, and we encourage those innovations to apply for those funds. On your application forms, we also ask you to be very specific about which target under the SDGs that you are focused on. So, for example, with clean water and sanitation, is your innovation around access to safe water, or is your innovation around access to hygiene, or is your innovation around reducing water pollution? So we really ask you to go into that level of detail about the targets you're focusing on. To be ODA eligible, well, official development assistance is the aid provided by governments for the economic development and welfare of developing countries. Some of the money can be spent in the donor country, but not on capital infrastructure. So to be eligible, you have to be seeking to investigate a specific problem, provide evidence as to why that is a problem, and to identify an appropriate pathway to impact. And you must do work in the developing country. So I guess as an example, again, if you're developing a water solution, a water innovation, if that innovation is only going to benefit the middle class or the wealthy in that country, it will not be ODA eligible. Or again, with education, if it's only going to be benefiting private school students in that country, it would not be ODA eligible. It has to be accessible. I mean, it may benefit both, or a broad section, but it must be accessible to poor and disadvantaged communities in that country. So it must work in a DAC-listed country, and you can find this list online. There are about 140 countries in scope. There are some exclusions, and Argentina, Antigua and Barbuda, China, Panama and Palau. In the last round, of those that are selected, the 31, they are spanning across 23 different countries. In your application form, there's a section on gender equality and social inclusion, and we ask you to write a statement and really think this through carefully. And in the last round, we had some really excellent responses to this. Zoe will talk after me in more detail about this issue, but it's really to explain how your project is going to positively benefit gender equality and social inclusion and mitigate against any unintended negative impacts. We do feel that there's also quite a correlation between the quality of the answer to this question and the quality of the applications overall. So we're really interested to see how people think this through. So that's just a recap on the scope factors. Out of scope is fairly self-explanatory. It's not meeting those 5 factors, but I do want to highlight a couple of additional factors that would put you out of scope. In this round, like I said, we're making it mandatory to include human-centred design, which was not the case last time. And this one's really important. You must not request more than £60,000 in grant on your form. Now, unfortunately, more than 25% of applicants in the last round did, unintentionally really, apply for more than £60,000 in grant. And the reason is that on the financial table in the form, I think it automatically calculates 70% for small businesses as the grant allowance. And that's fine if your project costs are £85,000, it will be £60,000. But we allow project costs of up to £120,000. I'm seeing lots of people nodding in recognition here. And so if your project costs are £120,000, you must manually adjust the percentage down to 50%. And so it comes out at £60,000. So please make that your priority to double and triple check. And it may be that your project partners are also working on the form, and we had one case where it was all fine and then a project partner increased their costs and it put the grant amount out, which is heartbreaking because I know how much effort it takes to fill in these application forms. So I think that's my biggest message of today is please check your table and right at the end before you submit. And if you've got any questions about it, please get in touch. So eligibility, the lead applicant has to be a UK business. The lead admin applicant must be a UK business. They can also be the technical lead, but the technical lead can also be any organisation from any other country. It can be a business, a research organisation, or an NGO from any other country. You can subcontract 50% of eligible project costs. Research organisations can claim up to 30%. Must include work in developing country, and these are the eligible project costs between £85,000 and £120,000. I think this really, I've covered this already. Admin lead must be UK business, technical lead from any other country. These are the percentages. I expect you're mostly familiar with these. For a small business, you can get 70% grant, medium 60% and large 50%. It is open to businesses of any size. International partners are funded on the same percentages as the UK organisations. So these are the key dates. Obviously the most important one being the deadline of 12 noon on the 6th of May, and applicants will be informed on 19th of June. If you're interested in finding partners, particularly human-centred design professionals, KTN is a really excellent resource to find those. They have a great network of human-centred design professionals, so do get in touch with them. And EEN is also a great network to help find business partners, including overseas partners, so do get in touch with them. And if you have any questions while you're filling in your application form, please contact us at the customer support services, and often those emails will come through directly to me, and I can help support either by email or by phone. And the KTN is also a great source of support and will review applications and answer questions as well. So that's all from me. I've got some time left, I think, to answer some questions if there are any at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Sorry, can we just wait? This is being webcast, so we need to.
Just to say thank you very much. That was very helpful. Is the presentation available to us? We can pass it around the houses. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Why only 2 SDGs? What happens when you deliver a benefit across multiple SDGs?
Yeah, it's a good question. And that's fine if your innovation, and some undoubtedly will, impact many SDGs. But we're asking you, which one is the priority? What's your priority SDG?
Hi. We were one of the unintended victims last time.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Of that lucky 25% who went at 61,000. So we'll sort that out. We had another technical problem, which I just want to bring up for everybody's benefit.
Great, yeah.
When you're doing phase 1 in a country with local partners, intended local partners, they do not have a UK company's house registration. But when you're trying to key in,
Right.
you have it almost like mandatorily makes you then take a UK partner.
It's a very good point, yes.
Yeah.
And we are internally ironing that out currently. I don't know if it will have been ironed out in time for this application. But so if it hasn't, what we suggest is that you just put in a dummy address there, or we even advise people to put in our own Innovate UK Polaris House address there, because we understand you have to fill something in that field. So you can use our address.
Correct. So the confusion is, in the qualifying criteria, you say that the admin lead must be a UK company, and it is not mandatory that at that stage you have to declare who the partners are, because but then in the online system, you cannot proceed unless you name at least one more partner.
Is that right?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
And that's what happened with us. And then we had to find, and then when we tried naming the partners in the target country, since they didn't have company house registration, at the last moment we found a UK-based charity partner whom we got in.
Okay.
I mean, it was just to fill the system in.
Yeah, right.
So I'm just requesting to see if that can be,
Okay.
Maybe we did not get the right thing. Maybe we got it wrong. I'm sure if others have got it right, maybe we need to learn something from there.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, thanks.
I will check that with the technical team. So I would say we don't obviously want to skew people's plans just for the sake of filling in a form, and I'm very sorry if that happened. So if you're struggling with that, the best thing to do is get in touch straight away, and we will help you to find a way around it. And it's best to we can have a conversation about it so that you don't have to,
I think there are 2 over here.
Any other? Oh.
Hi. So from the online webcast at the moment, we have, can academics apply as a single partner in phase 1?
I'm not sure what they mean by single partner. Academics can't be the lead, so they could, if there's a UK business lead, they can have a single academic partner in phase 1.
Okay, thank you. I've answered the second one online, but just for the majority of people, in case they also have the same question, an innovation related to access to energy SDG 7 is not eligible. Is this correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so I've mentioned agri and energy. Is it open to startups?
It is, yes.
Okay, thanks, Jo. Is it open to financial services businesses?
Yes.
Thank you. And for the international partners, you mentioned that organisations will be funded at the same rate as UK companies. Could you explain this further?
So, yes, I'll just go back to that slide. So this is the rate at which UK companies are funded. So if you're a small business, you're funded at 70% of the grant. 70% of project costs you can claim as grant. If you're a university, you can claim 100% of project costs as grant. So those are the percentages of funding that you can claim, depending on what type of organisation you are for UK businesses, and the same applies for international partners.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jo. And are community interest companies, CIC, eligible to be a single lead company?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. In a phase one pilot, we're already doing it, and that we've got great traction. And what we'd like to do would be to migrate over to the phase two straight away,
Right.
which in a commercial world, when you're looking at innovation, and of protecting innovation, it's all about being agile and getting to the market, much more important than IP and anything else. And it is just being able to roll it out. Therefore, to look at that plan and see a sort of a gap in between, I'm thinking this simply isn't commercial. This is actually obstructive. And if there was some way in which one could look for a dispensation and take a more agile initiative, it would be hugely appreciated.
Yeah, I absolutely take your point, and I agree. We want to keep the momentum, and momentum is absolutely essential. However, this is public money, it's government money, and so we have to be very strict around it. It's not private investment. So if you're needing to move more quickly, you might be better off looking for private investment. You know, this is public grant, and so it's going to come with restrictions, I'm afraid.
So that's my point.
Yeah.
That it's a waste of, it's an inefficient use of public money to put in these kind of barriers, not to have that kind of ability.
I do take your point. Yeah. I totally appreciate your point, absolutely. And, there are certain ways to mitigate in that through the due diligence, if businesses get their documents all lined up absolutely ready, and they work as quickly as they can to get the documents ready, and the partners pass their due diligence quickly, that can accelerate the process. So that is sort of the longest term that it would take, and it may take quicker if if everyone works at top speed. It may take quicker, but there's no getting around the fact that there would have to be some period of due diligence and checking and accountability, etc. And that it takes an incredibly long time to raise private investment as well. I mean, it can take easily 9+ months to raise private investment. So it's hard. Raising money is hard, and this is one route, and there are other routes that are also open. But I do appreciate and take your point. And we would work as quickly as we could, as well as the applicants working as quickly as they could.
Hello. First of all, thank you for that presentation. It was really good. I was also one of the 25%, 61, so we're together.
There's a special club.
Yeah. I feel an affinity. But having created this other proposal, which was rejected, I thought, I could just resubmit. But it's different now, isn't it? The application form. So I was wondering if you could explain how this round is different from the first round in terms of the types of questions and why it's changed.
Sure. We have changed the application form slightly. It's not hugely different, but there are some significant differences. And so we're asking questions that are slightly more business orientated. So, for example, we'll be asking what is your value proposition as opposed to what's your project description. That's one difference. We'll be asking why you think there's potential market demand in the country and what evidence have you got around that, as opposed to need. So I'm really, I know I'm sort of going on about this point, but I see it a lot with businesses in this country and in other countries that people get distracted by the obvious need, and what we're really wanting people to look at and answer is what about the demand. So it's questions like that. They're just slightly more business oriented.
Yeah, I've got a question about the first point in the out of scope, the need to have a demonstration ready device or whatever it is. So the concrete question is, we have like a framework with how we can deploy technology in a developing country. And we would like to use the funding to have a pilot implemented in a place in the country with input from the community. Is that something we can do?
Yes, so I would say across the competition you could do that, but the piloting would probably come in phase 2. In phase 1, it would be really working with the community and getting their insights, observing how people behave, understanding what they want, how they might, getting their input, just as you said, would be the phase 1 activities. And we really want people to do this as deeply as they can within that period of time, so that then that informs how they then do the pilot. So what we don't want people to do is rush in and do a pilot. We want people to take the time first to work with the communities.
I just wanted to double check the funds allocated. The UK, do you fund the UK lead, and the UK lead has responsibility to allocate funds to overseas partner? Is that how?
Yeah, exactly.
It works?
Yeah, we call it a hub and spoke model. So all the money goes to the UK company, and then they disperse it to their partners.
And I understand about the how much they could spend, the UK partner, in terms of capital expenditure. How about is there any limit about further research or administration cost for the UK partner, or is there any kind of criteria on that?
There aren't actually any specific criteria around that.
Okay, thanks.
Hi. I just want to clarify a question that the gentleman asked over there. I think one of the things I am wondering is, what do you mean by demo day ready? So when do you consider something as it is ready for the demo?
Yeah, it is. I think there was some confusion around this in the first round. So it's really that you have a solution that's built, that's technologically as ready as you can get it to be, and you think that there is could be a demand for it in a certain market, but you don't know that yet, and you haven't launched in that market yet. You may have launched in another country and it went well, and now you want to target this country, and so it's at that stage. You're really ready to prototype, essentially. However, this phase 1 is just helping you refine that prototype for that particular market, because you might need to do some technical adaptations or design adaptations, or it might inform how you actually market when you do prototype. So it's really a sort of an opportunity to fine-tune your innovation in relation specifically to that market. Does that make sense?
Actually, I think my question is actually quite linked to that. So if we're going into a developing country and we're trying to find out if they need our product, if we've already got to the stage where it's technically there, what sort of questions then are you asking from your human-centered design, that you get the people who are going to use it right at the beginning, not when you spend a lot of money developing a technology, and then it's almost like you're enforcing that technology and you're just trying to get people to agree with your technology. How do you know it's even the right technology if you're not looking to do the feasibility in the country? That's the bit I'm not quite sure
I think
on.
that's a really, really good point, actually, really good question. I would say that what we're not looking for is a product that needs a lot of technical development in terms of... Oh, sorry, I'm leaning on the computer. We're not looking for... Because of the time frame of the competition, we can't really afford to support innovations that need another year or two of technical development before they're going to be ready. So that's why we're looking for innovations that are almost market ready. Now, there's still a long way to go, I would say, before launching in that market, and there's a lot of work that can be done around how people are going to access the technology, how they're going to use it, and it may well be that you need to do some technical adaptations to it, or you need a particular way of distributing it, or a particular way that people are going to be able to use it. And so it's that we're interested in. It's the human behaviour element that we're interested in. Now, it may be that your technology doesn't work. That is something you might discover in phase 1. And so it may be that then you would have to go back to the drawing board and refine it if that's the feedback that you've had in phase 1. And that's what we're helping people to discover before they go into market.
Sorry, got one over here. Straight over. Next.
Can you tell us a little bit more about phase 2 and where the money comes from? I'm in the middle at the back.
Middle at the back. Oh, sorry, there you are.
Because obviously it's a fairly substantial sum, the phase 2 we're talking about.
Sorry, could you start again? I couldn't hear.
So can you tell us a bit more about the phase 2 expectations? It's a significant sum of money, $750,000 to $1 million.
Yeah.
What are you expecting the lion's share of those costs to go on? Is it large scale in market pilots? Is it high cost of prototypes, for example?
It's really impossible to say, actually. It will totally depend on the innovation. But it is to prototype. It's to get your innovation into the market, and it will then most likely need refining, modifying, iterating. It may throw up all kinds of unexpected requirements or different business models, etc. So it's a real chance to. It will be a sort of a circular process during phase 2. We're not expecting it to be a linear, right, we're in market boom. There's still a huge amount of learning, and I suppose this points to your the previous question, is that there's still the opportunity in phase 2 to modify and refine that prototype depending on the real life feedback once it's in the market.
Okay, so potentially you could build a prototype, put it in market, or prototypes, then go back and do more prototyping in response in phase 2.
Yes.
And what sort of scale of pilot are you? What would you regard as a pilot? Is 10 people a pilot, or is it got to be 100 or 1,000?
Yeah, I can't really answer again because different technology. If it's a digital technology, it could be hundreds of thousands. If it's a very specific technology, it might be much smaller than that. So it can vary. I suppose that's the answer.
I guess what's the difference between a pilot and commercial from your point of view? So if you're putting a product into the market and you're asking consumers to pay for it, because otherwise it wouldn't be a pilot, what's the difference between that and just a straightforward product launch from
Right. So I would say it's still in the testing phase. You would be deploying it in a phased way. You would be testing with certain consumers or users. You'd be getting that feedback. You'd be iterating. You'd be refining. You might do some more design work. And then you would be working towards being confident enough in the market to then operate at a greater scale. So it's still, I would say, it's still a testing phase.
Okay. Just one more. I'll echo the point on timelines, because if we got going on the first pilot and then you've got to wait to get your phase 2 off the ground, that's a real challenge.
I know. I do hear that. I know it's a real challenge, and that momentum is so important. But at the same time, there's a lot that needs to be done as well within that interim period. There's a lot that you will have learned from phase 1, a massive amount that you'll need to reflect on and potentially look at your model and how you might refine it. You'll need to be setting up agreements with your partners. You may well be wanting to raise external additional finance from the private sector as well. And in fact, this is a great opportunity to use this phase 2 as a way to attract additional investors, to say, look, we've got an opportunity to bid for £500,000. Why don't you come in and back us as well? So that in itself will also take time. So there's a huge amount to explore coming out of phase 1, I think. Now, I know that as entrepreneurs, you need to move quickly and you operate at an incredible pace. So, and I do appreciate, but these are the parameters of this competition.
Yes, hello. Thank you for your presentation. It's very welcome to see user-centered design as the centre for the drive for innovation. So, from the design community, thank you. A declaration and a question, please. A declaration is that there are user-centered design experts in the room. There are 2 at this table, if anyone wants to talk to people here. And the question is really about your need is not equal demand. So my question is, within phase 1, are you looking to establish market demand? If so, it puts a different emphasis on the project, the type of study that we'll be undertaking.
Yes, we are interested in understanding if there is market demand, and if so, what does that look like? So we're interested in, and depending on the product, users may be different from the customers, obviously. So we're interested in how people are going to use this technology and this innovation, and how they behave around that. Exploring user journeys around their particular problem the problem that you're trying to solve, etc. So we're very interested in user behaviour. But we do want to support commercial businesses and innovations that have commercial potential. And so we are interested in understanding, are there buyers for this as well, whether or not they are also the users.
And you'd like that quantified in some manner?
We, not necessarily quantified, but we want to get insights into the demand. So we want to understand if this is a potential buyer, what will they need it to look like, or how will they need to access it in order for them to want to buy it? At what price point would it work for these potential buyers?
Okay, so you're talking more of a commercial proposal, one that can be evaluated, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we've just got time for one more question here.
Thank you. I tried to apply last year, and I was one of the 25% who didn't make it. But the reason why I feel I didn't make it was because your financial section is it's very rigid. For instance, I applied as a small business, so there's a 70% claim. But when I said that my international partner didn't want to claim, there's no way on the form you can actually make adjustments to reflect that. So rather than getting over the 60,000, I told them that I actually wanted to reduce the 30% of the international partner, and there's nowhere in the form where you can do that.
So you were claiming 70%,
and my partner was claiming something like 65%. So that would have put
you over. Oh, yes. I see. Okay, but there was nowhere to change that.
And I spoke to your support team for a good 1 week, and they could do nothing about it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very sorry about that. So if that's the case next time, what I would say is write into the support and ask to speak directly to me, and we will try and find a way around that. If the technical platform isn't supporting what we need, we'll have to find a workaround.
Okay, thanks. And just last point. Capital is not funded, is it?
Capital costs cost of capital equipment and so on in the UK is not funded, but usage of that can be funded, not purchase.
Fine, thank you.
I think that's all we've got time for, but please do call in or write in, and I'm really happy to answer any more questions over the coming month to 6 weeks. Just wanting to go back to the human-centred design, if there are any designers in the room, could you put your hands up? Look at that. Oh, amazing, hidden talent in the room. Thank you very much for coming. And so, yes, it would be a great opportunity to network in the break with those designers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll hand over now to Zoe, who's going to talk about equality, diversity and inclusion.
So good morning, everyone. I've got a frog in my throat as well. So I'm Zoe Jones. I'm a diversity and inclusion programme specialist at Innovate UK. I'm here to talk to you a bit today about why diversity and inclusion is important to business and innovation. Then I'll take you through what are Innovate UK's approaches to EDI and what we're expecting from you in this competition as part of the gender equality and social inclusion question. So just to begin with as well, and to bridge on to what Joe was saying, we had some amazing applications or responses to this question in the last phase 1 competition. And we did take the hypothesis that high quality applications would have a high quality diversity and inclusion response as well. And that was we were largely correct. So first of all, the case for diversity and inclusion. We no longer really need to talk about this, I don't think. But embracing diversity and inclusion is a huge opportunity for business as well. It doesn't just improve the impact and the quality of innovation, it's a huge opportunity for business. It can fundamentally enhance profitability. So this is quite slightly outdated evidence, but a McKinsey report on diversity that looks into executive boards and shows that gender diversity boosts financial performance by 21%, and ethnic and cultural diversity positively increased the likelihood of financial performance by 33%, which is quite a big percentage. And it's not just about why diversity and inclusion is good for business, it's also about what can go wrong. So diversity and embedded bias in the innovations that we're producing and working towards can have serious implications on the products and services that are created as part of that. So a few years ago now, Google's speech recognition software, when they first developed it, was 70% more likely to understand male voices at the end of their product development process. And there's actually one up in the top right-hand corner, which is more recent, and it was a home office technology that's passport recognition that doesn't recognise black skin. So we don't want to be investing in innovations that produces this kind of errors, and we want users to be involved in the design process and a diverse range of users, and that's why the human-centred design process is so important for this competition. So equality, diversity and inclusion at Innovate UK, we're committed to encouraging this across business-led innovation. We strongly believe that the best ideas for innovation can come from anyone, that diversity within business is proven to contribute to enhanced performance and commercial success, and that diverse teams and frameworks and the way people think about things can produce better outcomes. So we run our own targeted programmes in the UK that address specific underrepresentation. So the Women in Innovation programme and the Young Innovators programme, which is a partnership with the Prince's Trust, which you may have heard of. But we also work a lot with teams across the organisation and different programmes to ensure that equality, diversity and inclusion is considered across everything that we do as a funder. So gender equality and social inclusion in this competition. So all Innovate UK-led GCRF competitions will have a gender equality and social inclusion question. The question currently is mandatory but unscored, so it forms part of the scope checks that we do internally. That's right, isn't it, Joe?
Yes, but applicants will be deemed out of scope if they don't.
Exactly.
Can you just repeat for the...
I will, yes. So the gender equality and social inclusion question, which is question 6, there's an internal scope check of that response, and if you don't address the question well enough, which I'll go through in the second slide, you will be deemed out of scope, and that did happen in the previous round. So answering this question ensures that we as a funder are complying with the International Development Act, but it's really much more than that. We want to, we want to understand how your innovation is not widening gender inequality, and also how it is, contributing to boosting gender equality. But we want to see a kind of understanding beyond that. So good applications will show kind of where you've thought about diversity and social inclusion beyond gender. Also, there'll be a workshop with successful Phase 1 applicants where we'll talk to you a bit more about gender equality and social inclusion, what's expected throughout Phase 1 of the project, and also to share experiences from previous projects or what your businesses work on already, and to encourage kind of good practice across the cohort. So essentially, why I'm bringing that up is so we're not just saying you have to answer this and then we're not going to support you in any way if it's not your core expertise or remit. So the application question itself, question 6 on the form, you've got 400 words to work through these 3 questions. So the way that we've constructed this is so that you're thinking about gender equality and social inclusion right from the start and throughout the project plan. So it's not just an add-on or a statement that you fill in and it's not a thread throughout the whole project. So we want to understand from you who is involved in the project. Do you have any relevant diversity and social inclusion experience or expertise in the core project team? Can you provide information on any partner organisations you're already working within this space, their role and expertise? And that can include community groups, NGOs or government stakeholders. Identify where you see the need to build new links with partner organisations throughout this phase one. And as Joe was saying, it's a great opportunity, if you don't feel you have this expertise, to do that in the initial phase one of the competition. So the second part is, how will you factor this into your project plan? So we want to see, you to describe how your project will address gender equality and social inclusion issues, including how your innovation will impact on poorer consumers, disabled people and older people. Explain or have a go at explaining how you might measure this and show the impact throughout phase one and definitely leading up to phase two, as you'll be able to show that demonstrable impact far more. And also, as I said, we want to see how your approach will feed into the overall project plan, which is actually in question 5 now, so apologies for the mistake there. We also want to know what's the potential, so what's your current understanding on the expected outcomes of your project and benefits of your innovation on gender equality and social inclusion, and the potential negative effects of your project and how you plan to mitigate these. So there's probably some people in the room that are thinking, my project or my innovation, it's not specifically linked to solving gender inequality issues. That's okay, but we're expecting you to provide clear evidence in your answer that you fully considered this. You've thoroughly considered the questions and you've factored in this thinking early on. As I said, there will be support available to kind of develop your approach throughout phase one if you're successful. And now we also have some do's and don'ts from the previous competition. So first of all, don't only address gender equality and social inclusion at the organisational and UK level. We want to see you thinking about that in the impact of your innovation and the end users that you're working with. So think about the kind of how and what's as well in the previous slide. So do address gender equality and social inclusion. So as I said, we really want you to encourage to think about groups of users and not just consider gender equality, but that is part of core compliance. So you must address that in your application. Don't submit an insufficient answer, because we did see this a few times where it was either blank or people had just kind of copied and pasted the rest of their project plan into the answer, and that didn't work for us. So do use evidence. So what's your understanding of the gender equality issues already, and set out how you intend to implement the plan and make that progress measurable. So we had some really good examples of what people were looking to measure specifically to their innovation and projects based on previous experience. So, and also don't only demonstrate goodwill to consider this, tell us how you're going to do it, because there are a lot of people that said, yes, I agree, it's a good idea, but we kind of want to know how and what you're going to do. So thank you very much, everyone. And I think there might be some time for questions.
We just have time for 2 very quick questions, if there are any.
Thank you. I've got about 50 actually, but so they're not actually related to this specific slot. Okay. Is there any way you can answer from the previous slot? Oh, okay. Okay, so I've seen a couple that you have covered, so we'll put a Q&A together. I think if we can do an FAQ, that would be amazing. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, thank you so much. It's really good to see this kind of initiative, and I wanted to see if you could tell us more about what kind of plans you have for supporting the projects on phase 1? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So the phase 1 projects are actually due to have their first cohort day in April, which is where we bring together the whole cohort. Joe could tell you a bit more about that, and there'll be insights on what's expected in phase 2 and throughout phase 1. There will be a session on gender equality and social inclusion. As I said, part of it is not just us telling you what we want you to do, it's encouraging the cohort to share what they've done already, what metrics they're using to measure impact, and to share good practice. We'll also bring in equality, diversity and inclusion experts who work in this field, and other businesses that have successfully shown how they're using or addressing gender equality and social inclusion for better impact. So that's how we're looking to do that.
Thank you. Hello. So last time this was a pass-fail question within the assessment. Is that still the case? And are the pass-fail criteria the same? So I passed last time. Do I fundamentally need to change what I'm doing, or would it pass again?
I don't know which application you're referring to, but I'm sure.
But it passed.
The
It was a
question
binary.
hasn't changed. The question hasn't changed.
Have your expectations of the answer changed?
No.
Okay.
They're still what's outlined in those 3 points is what we're looking for.
Okay. And you said about getting expertise. You know, we're a small company, a handful of people. We're not going to have a inclusion person per se. Do we physically need to buy somebody into the project, or is the kind of expertise you're going to provide the cohort and stuff, is that enough?
No, as I said, we'd like to know what expertise or what you would like to do in phase 1, and then we can work with you to help provide that. So I think there's design consultants that are working with phase 1, are there? So we're happy to, if there is a need across the cohort to provide that expertise, we're happy to consider that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great. I'll hand over now to Sven, who's going to tell you about the KTN and give you some top tips for your proposal.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Sven Knowles. I'm with the KTN, and generally we provide assistance to events and submissions like yourselves. But I'd like to give a quick background on who we are first. We are under BEIS, Department for Business, Energy and Industry Strategy, who support the UKRI and then into the Innovate UK. And Innovate UK provide the funding to KTN, and under that, the KTN, we connect, we link, we network people together, and we provide advice and assistance to companies. And our key focus is to bring about growth through innovation. So you're all here today to bring about innovation, and we want to assist you to bring about that and bring forward the growth. So the key headlines are connecting. We find partners, we help build consortiums, so if you have a problem finding or an issue finding someone to connect with, we can look at our database, we can look at our contacts, and we can bring you together with other people. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Funding. Like this event today, we can help you address, find, and identify funding from multiple sources. And at the end of this, I'll be highlighting a good table that goes and brings together other sources of funding outside this scope, because we're broad in that addressing. Influencing, supporting, and navigating are the 3 other parts that we do on a day-by-day basis. Example there, the influencing and the supporting. We listen to your feedback, we listen to what technologies, we listen to what needs to be informed to other agencies, and we inform the policy makers. We help with the business planning, and we help with the support. So multitasking on this part. So how do we do all of this? People, we find expertise. We have the contacts, we have the names, and we have the people. So you come to us and say, I need someone who can go and do this, we can help you find that person. Products, we can help find markets and identify markets for it, and also review what you've already done and what you're going to go forward to do, which comes back onto what we're doing today. And finally, pounds, money. We can help you find finance. And that's one of the areas that we'll go and highlight and discuss at the end of this again. So why do we do with this? Each £1 in grant that we go forward, we find that we're bringing about a multiplier by value of 12. So after 5 years of projects, our project value is £50 for each £1 invested. So we are being successful, we are being monitored, and we are checking and analysing this to make sure we are helping and assisting properly. So, today's submission, we've got the link on this presentation. You are going to be making application, many of you, through this service. And we know, because we've seen it before, how best to go forward and how to make the application. So we have a document, good application guide. I've got the website here, and that will be issued as well at the end, which assists on the writing the application out. But there are fundamentals, things that we find that people do and make mistakes on which need to be addressed. And I think that's already been covered twice before here, but these are the key ones that we go and highlight. Is the market big enough? Does it represent value for money compared to the investment requested? Ask yourself that and write down why and how it does. That's what these people are looking at. Remember, they're looking at many submissions from yourselves. Being focused and answering these types of questions brings about a better response. Can the innovation be world leading? Is the idea sufficiently distinctive and strong to be successfully exploited in the UK and globally? Again, it's one of those that you need to be asking yourself and answering to us. One of the key things that I see many times is I can do a Google search for a product that someone says, this is what I want to develop, this is required, this is needed for the market, and I find it's already available on the internet. Someone is already trying to sell it, someone has already developed it several years ago, which is fine if you've got a new angle on it and a new market, but if it's the same market and the same repetition, it's going to stop again, and we will identify that, and it will cause issues for your submission. Is it at the right stage of development? It needs to be market driven. Can you identify and show that your product is market driven? Here we're not wanting just a research product, we want a real product that's going to go out there and address the market. And having a customer in mind and identifying that customer, I think there was the numbers before, saying how many customers can use this, how it can be utilised, who that customer is and who that demographic is. And if that can link into Zoe's comments before, that's even better. And why should public money be spent? This is public provided money. So why can you not use other funds or a VC or something else? Now, if that is useful, KTN can help you identify things like angel investors, VCs. So please do come and talk to us. But consider it in advance because it's going to be a question that the reviewers are going to be asking. And the risk register. This is one of those key things that we do find is everyone says, or people say, there is no risk. Or we haven't considered those parts. The people reviewing this have an understanding of what potential risks might be. If you can answer those risks and how you're mitigating them or addressing them in advance, will make those reviewers feel a lot more confident about your proposal. And that's a real key one, is that we don't want the risk to be, if it fails to ship there, we want you to make it directly specific to the products you're pushing and promoting. So that's the link again, and it's there really so you can click on it when we send this to you. I have a final slide here, which is more general, bit of a promotion for the KTN, to be honest. Just highlighting the TRL levels and other agencies outside the KTN, and it's because it's impossible to read. That's a much easier one. So highlighting that depending on what your TRL level is, if it doesn't fit for this, there are other agencies out there, including things like EEN, the Catapult Centres, as well as Innovate UK and the research councils who can also address it. So I try to summarise this on the table so you can also look at, and as I said before, we can also assist on the writing and approaching the money. So please feel free to come to myself or to others within the KTN and ask for advice and assistance if required. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Okay, good. That's great. That's it.
Since you brought up risk registers, can I ask a question about risk registers?
Of course.
Phase 1 is a risk mitigation exercise for Phase 2, because you're doing a small-scale study that's lightly funded. Effectively, you're asking for papers, not a paper study, but a study in market going to talk to people. There aren't that many risks to doing a £60,000 study. There's tons of Phase 2 risks of all the things that could possibly go wrong. What kind of risks are you expecting when you're going to do some people-centred design?
I don't have an example from yours, but from examples I've seen before, even on the smaller scale, example risk could be unable to gather the right type of audience to test the product on, or unable to address that market because that market does not want to talk to the people that you've sent out there. So it's very market specific, and this is the point. It's going to be related to what your product is and what your item is. But we want it to show, it's to show that you have an understanding of what may hinder you. Maybe it's a better word than a risk. But it means that you understand how you're going to push it forward and how you're going to go forward.
Do it.
Oh. Can't see. Only one mic too.
Good morning, and thanks for your presentation. Just wondering, in the process of trying to test out test the feasibility of a market, there's a path where one might be looking at user testing. Now, that is a cost. That typically may fall under a marketing cost. Those generally aren't very acceptable in Innovate UK cases. So how does that feature here, and what is the kind of possible budget limit that one can allocate so that one can engage a possible audience?
Yeah. I'm afraid I'm going to pass those types of questions back to the Innovate UK.
I would say that those types of costs would come under labour, materials, that type of cost. What is it that you need to do that user testing? And those would be perfectly acceptable for the Phase 1 costs.
Thanks. In the run-up to this, I was trying to share a link on GCRF with my colleagues at Royal Academy of Engineering, but everywhere I kept on bouncing around UKRI and KTN and etc. Is there the best sort of entry point to that?
Yeah.
Yes. We have a programme page which details all of the competition, what we're looking for and everything like that. So when we send these slides out after today, we'll make sure that there is a big link that you can share with your partners.
Another quick question. Thanks. And within that, we've got a lot of international fellows who have the technology, and they're looking probably for the admin lead in UK. You know, it doesn't have to be UK technology that goes out and helps the world. The world can sort of come the other way as well. And how do we use KTN to help sort of improve that network?
If you come to us and highlight what your product is, we have a team of people who are specific to each technology, engineering, process part. We can highlight you to the best person who has their network, who can go and contact you to your requirement and meet you with your requirements.
Right. Last question.
Thanks for the presentations. Just a quick clarification. You talked about the overall goals as being around growth through innovation, which I'm comfortable with. Whose growth? Just the UK's or the countries we're going to be working in?
That's good. The UK has a focus to improve the UK companies, UK PLC, but this is a fantastic expansion of that and brings about a overlaying level of that. I mean, so it, both in the second instance, but our primary focus of the KTN is UK.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sven. Great. So I'll hand over now to Ben, who's going to tell us about human-centered design.
Thanks, Charlie. Given the number of designers in the room, this might be a bit teaching grandma to suck eggs. And it's nearly coffee time, so I'll try to get through it fairly quickly. Fortunately, Joe's already done a good job of explaining how design hopefully fits into the whole concept of the programme. But I thought it might be useful just to try and give you an idea of what your phase 1 project might actually look like and how you could incorporate human-centred methodologies into that. So Joe's already talked about phase 1 being about discovery. This is the opportunity to do the human-centred design piece. And in this case, we're being quite clear that we're mandating human-centred research and design approach for this phase 1 activity, although you can include activities to test technical feasibility as well. And again, Joe's mentioned already why we think this is really important. Technology is only ever part of the solution. So whilst your particular idea might rely on a certain technology to make it feasible, actually to deliver the necessary performance, the reality is that whether people choose to buy, adopt and use that idea ultimately depends on their motivations, their perceptions and their behaviour. And it's important to realise that that decision-making process is based on benefits generally, not technology. So people aren't buying the technology, they're buying what that technology can do for them. And those decisions are informed by culture, by perceptions, by people's concerns and motivations. And I guess the key thing here is that it's very difficult to really get your head around those issues and translate that into how it might inform your idea if you're just sat behind your desk. So this is a hand dryer. We're all familiar with hand dryers, but put your hands up if you've ever used one of these to dry something other than your hands. Yeah, most people, right? So it's a very common use case. And if we were to sat at our desks to design a new hand dryer, we could probably quite quickly come up with a list of performance criteria. Might need to displace a certain amount of air or deliver a certain airflow. It might need to reach a certain temperature. The installation process might be taken into consideration. But would you consider that kind of human behaviour? And could that, if you did consider that, could that actually lead you to a slightly better or less frustrating experience? I've got a 4-year-old son, and I really struggle to get him to use these because he doesn't like the noise it makes. It's terrifying, right? How many people, when they design a hand dryer, actually think about that kind of thing? And that is something that's very familiar to us. We're all familiar with hand dryers. We use them in our day-to-day lives, not necessarily quite as extreme as that. But the point is that those challenges are magnified when we're thinking about markets that are actually kind of beyond our everyday experience. So in 2012, some researchers set out to investigate the health benefits of an improved cooking stove in rural India. A lot of challenges around smoke inhalation because of the use of traditional cooking methods indoors. But they actually found that the potential benefits of this technology weren't being realised, and it was nothing to do with the technical solution. Technical solution was perfectly good. It was all to do with how people were actually using those stoves. They weren't maintaining them correctly. They weren't using them in the way that they were expected to. And it turned out that they just preferred their traditional methods of cooking. They thought that things tasted different with the new stove and so on. And so in many cases, they were actually just using both methods side by side, which didn't deliver any benefits. And the key finding from that really is that as well as doing these kind of desk-based studies and technical feasibility studies, you really do need to get out there and observe and understand how people are behaving in the real world. So we think that a human-centered design approach can help with this. The best innovations are feasible, they're commercially viable, but they're also desirable to the people who might buy or adopt them. Desirability in this case obviously means a lot more than just, is it appealing to look at? Does it, in this case, does it meet a genuine need? Is it easy to understand the benefits of that solution? Can it be adopted and used readily? Is it aspirational? Does it fit with existing behaviour patterns? And does it take account of societal and cultural context? So human-centered design and research methodologies can help you get your head around that. It gives you the tools to to gather new, richer insights and to make discoveries. And the point here again is that this is often less about gathering market research data and quantitative insight, although that can form an important part of the process. But there's really an opportunity with these phase 1 projects to have quality conversations, to engage with people, observe what's going on in the real world, and actually get your hands dirty as well and kind of try things out for yourselves. You then need to be able to take that insight and translate that into ideas, and that's actually a kind of tricky part of the process which is often overlooked. Sometimes we approach this research almost as a kind of tick box exercise, and it's relatively easy to create huge amounts of learning and insight, but unless you have the expertise and the experience to filter that and actually see, well, okay, what are the real insights here that can help us inform our solution versus what might be a bit of a red herring? How are we going to translate that fuzzy insight into something that we can actually do, a plan or a means for delivering a better experience? And then design can help you to test those ideas and make important discoveries faster and cheaper. So although phase 2 of this competition is really where you're going to be doing serious prototyping, a lot of this design research early on can still involve making things and putting things in front of people to get more useful feedback. I'm sure you've all found that actually trying to explain an idea to someone just by talking to them and get their feedback on it is really difficult to do. But as soon as you put something on the table in front of people, even if it's just an image or a diagram or a quick mock-up, you'll suddenly start to get a much richer quality of feedback and insight from the people that you're engaging with. So with those kind of things in mind, how might you actually structure this phase 1 project? Just a reminder, kind of taken from the scope document, your start point is an innovation idea which really would benefit from some further research and development to make sure it meets the market demand and so on. And you need to go from that to the end of phase 1, where we're expecting to see a report which would include a preliminary business plan based around an idea which is better informed and more refined than it was before, and potentially even is a slightly different idea. We're quite open to the fact that you might make discoveries at this phase 1 stage which really result in you pivoting and deciding that you were going to do something that wasn't the best idea, and now you're going to go in a slightly different direction. So how do you get from one to the other? This is a kind of generic slide, I'm afraid. So in this case, it says embryonic idea. I think my understanding of the scope in this case is that you're slightly beyond an embryonic idea, but you've got an idea which nevertheless would benefit from some further investigation. And the first thing that you might want to do is then to go through this divergent exploration phase to build a broader and a deeper contextual understanding of the problem space and the opportunity that you're exploring. Quite how you do that will depend on the particular project, but as I say, we're very keen to see direct engagement with the people, the users, the customers, and any other stakeholders involved in the idea. And then having been through that kind of broad exploration, then begin to synthesize and filter that down towards what I've called here as a kind of recipe for success. So we would hope at this point that you're starting to really build a longer list. Again, if you think back to the cooking stove, you might start this project with a list of so many points that you need to achieve, mainly technical criteria perhaps. Having been through this research phase, you've then lengthened that list and added some stuff around human behaviour. Well, it needs to deliver food that tastes like the traditional cooking method. It needs to be easy to maintain. What does easy maintenance mean in this particular circumstance? So a longer list of ingredients, if you like, for a successful outcome. Then that forms your inspiration, if you like, for ideas. So you're then going to look, you're going to take that original idea and say, okay, well, how could we modify or change or improve that to better deliver that successful outcome? And in this case, the diagram, it looks rather linear, but in fact, this is where you might be doing a lot of that quick visualization, mock-ups and testing, so that you're not just putting ideas on post-it notes, you're actually testing them out with people and thinking, okay, that one works, that one doesn't work. If we take a bit of that one and a bit of this one, that might give us what we need. So constantly iterating. And some of this might even feed back into your initial recipe for success, if you like. So the discoveries that you're making based on putting these ideas in front of people is refining and informing your brief, if you like, as you go along. And then ultimately beginning to refine those ideas and your thinking down towards a refined, better informed idea that you can then put this business case around and a plan for how you're actually going to prototype and test that at a larger scale in phase 2 of the competition. So overall, you can kind of see this as a two-stage activity, if you like. So initially, what's the problem? The first part there, discover and define, is all about making sure that you're doing the right thing. And then the second part, when you're... So you might find someone who wants to come on board as a contributing partner, if you can work out a way for them to be reimbursed going forward with royalties or a share in the IP or so on. But in a lot of cases, if you want to just employ them to help with your project, you can do that via subcontracting. And although this is an opportunity to work with professional designers, we would like you to take the opportunity to get involved with that process as well. Aside from the particular project outcomes, we think that this is a good opportunity for businesses to learn a bit more about human-centered design and how it works and how they can adopt those methodologies going forward. So good opportunity to do that. We've talked already about the KTN being a useful contact point if you need help connecting with the design community. Equally, the Design Council in the UK can certainly provide a lot of useful case studies and resources. They're not a member organisation, so they don't have a directory of members. But the British Industrial Design Association do, as do the Design Business Association. So you can search for people with relevant expertise and disciplines that might be useful to you. If service design is something that's particularly important for your project, there is a service design network in the UK as well. And if you're just going onto Google and looking there, then I guess the key term really is to look for human-centered design and research rather than those disciplines that major more on the technical design for manufacture and so on. Okay, so hopefully that's just a little bit of extra additional information.
And one thing I would like to add, I see that we've got a lot of designers in the room today. If you're not...
Thank you, that was useful. It's kind of connected to both you and Joe. When you talk about understanding the demand, I think all SDGs have a big stakeholder, which is the public sector and the government. And I think consumers sometimes are indirect beneficiaries. So what the question really is, when we are applying for writing the application, the solutions are obviously designed to help the biggest stakeholder because they own the money, which in this case, when it goes commercial, the government and the public sector. But then consumers may get benefit, may not necessarily get a direct benefit out of it. So what we tend to see is that you can focus a lot on the end user, but the end user doesn't really, is always in the line of sight for the innovation, because the innovation has to be bought in by, let's say, a customer in this case. So how do you ensure the customer view and the user view is really balanced out?
And I think that's why we tend to talk about human-centered design or people-centered design rather than user-centered design, for example, because we appreciate there are a lot of stakeholders. And in fact, I think a good start point for a lot of these projects is actually just to sit down and map out that landscape. Who are the people that you need to be thinking about? And if it's more important for you to be talking to a delivery partner or a public body, or as important as talking to the users, then just make that clear in your application, in your plan.
Hi. Does this also include learning and development professionals as well? Because they also have a kind of a human focus as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of open to who you work with in this case, and although the design profession has a lot to offer, I think what matters is what you're doing and why you're doing it and the result that you're going to get. So, for example, you might want to work with ethnographers or people with particular research specializations in human behavior and so on, instead of or alongside a design consultant who can then translate that research into ideas. I think where you're getting the expertise from matters less than the quality of the expertise and how relevant it is to the challenge that you're facing.
Where the beneficiary is a common good, how do you identify the customer in that case?
I think I guess it depends to a certain extent on the particular project that you have in mind. But I guess there's always going to be someone who has to adopt, who has to put their hands in their pockets and pay for this thing. So that's one thing, is who's the customer going to be. As I say, I think it comes back to that mapping out, who are the different stakeholders that we might need to consider. Yeah, I agree. I appreciate it might be in some cases a bit more fragmented than just a single user.
But it might also involve behaviour change. In order for that common good to happen, it will require behaviour change, and so it's understanding who needs to change their behaviour and what's going to motivate them to do that would be part of the insights you'd want to gain.
Time for one more question? No?
Everyone wants a coffee, I think.
Thank you very much.
Well deserved.
Great, so we're now going to have a half-hour break. So if I can ask everyone to come back at 12 o'clock. Thank you very much.